What is up, everybody? Matt Modak here to give you some NFL player prop bangers for the Week 4 NFL betting slate. So we're specifically looking at the Sunday games, and I'm going to have a bunch of player props for you guys to lock in. The way we're playing the slate for Sundays, I'm going to have 5 players that we are backing to have good games on Sunday, 3 of which we are laddering, and we have 2 players in the 100 club. For those of you that don't know what that means, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's players that we think have a chance to go for 100 yards. 2 players are in that category as of right now for Sunday. So that's how we are playing the Sunday slate. Week 3 ended up being a pretty good week for me. Now, all of that success came on Monday Night Football when I played Ja'Marr Chase very heavily, and he came through for me. So all the profits you see, granted, our underdog plays didn't do well and our early bets didn't do well, but we were able to be profitable with our player props. And that was all from backing Ja'Marr Chase, who we took for him to have a blow-up game, and he did, and that was amazing. If you look at the entire season, we're still green on our early bets, granted up by less than a unit, but I only play 3 a week, so the profits on that aren't going to be super high because we just play them lightly. Underdogs, we are slightly down, but we are in the green on the player props. You know, we were red in the player props heading into Monday night. Ja'Marr Chase saved everything. I also hit my James Cook prop as well. So the beginning of the season, after a rough stretch from all of week 2 up until Sunday of week 3, finally we got over that on Monday Night Football. Hopefully by the time you're watching this, we had an amazing Thursday Night Football as well. We'll go ahead and recap everything, all of week 4, once the games have been played. But we can get right into these Sunday plays. So again, 5 players we're backing, 3 of which we are laddering, 2 of which we are laddering into the 100 club. But the first play that we are locking in here is Josh Allen, anytime touchdown, plus 135 odds at FanDuel. So Josh Allen, you know, there was a stretch where he scored a touchdown in 15 of 18 games, but he has now gone 2 straight games without a rushing touchdown. This is the perfect time to buy back in on the Josh Allen anytime touchdown prop. You know, that was for minus money 2 weeks ago. It was for around even money last week. Now we're getting it all the way up to plus 135 odds, which makes it the perfect time again to dive back in on it. You know, the run that Allen was on in the anytime touchdown department was absolutely absurd. I referenced it earlier. He had scored in 15 of 18 games, and in 5 separate games in that stretch, and he scored at least 2 touchdowns. So for those of you counting at home, that was 5 games with 2 touchdowns, only 3 games with 0 touchdowns, meaning he had more games with 2 than with 0. But he hasn't needed to do anything in the past 2 games. Let's look into them. Both of the last 2 games for the Bills have been complete and utter blowouts that legitimately weren't even close when the second half started. So Josh Allen did not need to use his legs to get into the end zone. 2 weeks ago, that was the Dolphins. Josh Allen only threw 6 pass attempts in the second half. The Bills blew out the Dolphins 31-10, and that was a game that was 24-10 at halftime. For those of you that need a reminder, that was the game in which Tua threw interception after interception, then he threw a pick 6, then he got hurt. It was just a complete and utter joke. The following week, which was last week, which was week 3, they played the Jaguars, and that was an even bigger blowout. They won 47-10, and that score was 34-3 at halftime. Josh Allen did not attempt a single pass in the second half of that game. So that now makes it 2 straight weeks in which Josh Allen has not needed to use his legs because the game were blowouts. That's not something that's going to happen week over week. They're not going to blow out their opponent every single week. And this game specifically should be close. The Ravens, despite their 1-2 record in a loss to the Raiders, they're a good team. You know, they're even slight favorites in this game. So even if you think the Bills are going to win, it should be a close game. It's just unlikely that they're going to keep blowing out opponents, especially good opponents like the Ravens. And this is a beautiful matchup for Josh Allen to drop back and pass a ton. Now, we are taking him to run into the end zone, but he should drop back and pass a lot. You can pass on the Ravens. We're going to get into that, right? And one of our player props is backing someone on the Bills receiving game, but you can pass against the Ravens. What you can't do is run on them, specifically with your running backs. They've allowed the fewest rushing yards per game, only 50 rushing yards per game. And they've also allowed the lowest, yards per carry as well, only 2.83 yards per carry. Now, teams aren't running the ball a lot on the Ravens because they can have success throwing it. But when teams have decided to run against the Ravens, they have not had a lot of success doing so. So the guess here is that even when the Bills get close to the end zone, they're going to be dropping back to pass more often than not. And in a normal circumstance, when games are close, Josh Allen is the red zone running back for the Bills. The last 2 weeks, it hasn't been that way. But if you look at like a larger sample size, he is their leading runner in the red zone. That's what we expect to happen in this game. In a game that I think they're going to move the ball up and down the field. And when they get close, it's going to be Josh Allen. The only close game this year the Bills have played in, Josh Allen had 2 rushing touchdowns. That was week 1 against the Cardinals. That's what we're expecting to happen in this one. I wouldn't be surprised if he had a double tater. We just need him for 1 tater. That's our first play of the game. Next play, we're sticking in the Bills versus Ravens, and we are laddering Dalton Kincaid. So we're taking his main line player prop over 36.5 receiving yards. That's at -110 odds at Bet365. We're putting a full unit on that bad boy. And then we're laddering him up to 50 plus receiving yards. That's at +190 odds at Bet365. That's a half unit on that. We're also laddering him up to 60 plus yards for +290 odds at Caesars. And we're putting a quarter unit on that bad boy. So fully in on the Dalton Kincaid game for this one. Now, Kincaid, it's been a slow start for him, without a doubt. Again, the last 2 games have been complete blowouts. But if you look at how things went when the games were actually close, the Bills were designing a lot of plays for Dalton Kincaid. 2 weeks ago, in that debacle on Thursday Night Football, the literal first drive of the game, the Bills designed multiple targets for Dalton Kincaid. He unfortunately got a little banged up. He was fine, just got a little banged up. And then when he returned to the game was a complete blowout. So they ended up not doing anything with him in the second half. Again, that was the Thursday Night Football game. And then you look at Monday Night Football this past week against the Jaguars. You look at the final stat line, it doesn't look terrible. I mean, he did hit his mainline receiving prop. He had 41 yards and he had a touchdown on 3 receptions. But it was the same thing. The Bills were winning 34-3 at halftime. And because of that, Kincaid had 0 receiving yards in the second half. And then week 1, just a bad performance. Nothing to sugarcoat there, just a bad performance. But what it does mean is that it's been 3 straight weeks of a lack of production for Dalton Kincaid. So people are not on his scent. But if you look at his metrics compared to other receivers on the Bills, it's actually pretty good. He's second on the team in total targets, but that's only 10 targets. That shows you how infrequently the Bills have been passing. He's second on the team in target percentage. Another incredibly low number of 13.7%, but that's the second most on the Bills. They just haven't needed to pass at all. And they've also been spreading the ball around with their receivers. But he's second on the team in first read targets with 7, and he leads the team in target percentage, meaning when he is on the field, as there are bugs flying through my face, when he's on the field, how many targets are designed for Dalton Kincaid? He leads the team with 30%. So 30% of the time he's on the field, he gets a designed target for him. Again, that's the most on the Bills. And I mentioned that you can pass on the Ravens. Well, let's get into that, right? Their passing defense has been an absolute disaster. They've allowed the most passing yards in the NFL through 3 games. They're allowing 315 passing yards per game. The next closest team is at 270. It's a massive difference between them and the next closest team. They've also allowed the 6th most yards per route run and the 5th most yards per target. So it's not like it's just a volume thing, right? It's not like, oh, the teams are just passing a ton. That's why they've given up the most yards. No, even on a per target, per route run basis, they're giving up a ton of receiving yards. And part of the issue with their passing game is they can't stop tight ends. They've allowed 93.3 receiving yards per game specifically to tight ends. That's the 2nd most in the NFL. Week 2, Brock Bowers, 9 receptions for 98 yards. Last week, week 3, Jake Ferguson had 6 receptions for 95 yards. I'm expecting Kincaid to go off in this game. We're only laddering him up to 60. If you wanted to just ride that bad boy all the way up to 100, I would not blame you. But either way, I love pieces of the Bills' offense in this game. That's plays 1 and 2, including one of our ladder plays. Before we get into the next one, real quick, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. If you could, do me a favor, click that subscribe button. If you're new to my channel, you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. Then for this specific video, like and comment, let me know what you think of the plays that I have. Let me know if you have plays that you like. I love reading through the comments. So go ahead and do all that stuff, like, comment, subscribe, helps me out a ton. All right, play number 3. Jaden Daniels, anytime touchdown, plus 130 odds at Caesars. Another rushing quarterback, another anytime touchdown prop. Now, I will admit for this one, I was waffling between Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson Jr. I think both of them have a great opportunity to score. I think if you wanted to take both, I would not blame you in the slightest. Daniels had better odds. You're getting him at plus 130 while Robinson's at plus 105. And it's also a little bit better odds discrepancy for Daniels when you compare the Caesars odds to every other book than when you look at the odds for Brian Robinson. But again, I would not blame you if you wanted to take both. And you look at this Commanders offense, they've been awesome. Even if you wanted to take away week 1, because a lot of the work that they did was in garbage time, they've gone 2 straight games without punting. They did not punt at all against the Giants in week 2, and they did not punt at all against the Bengals in week 3. Now, week 2 against the Giants, they scored 21 points. That was on 7 field goals. They could not get the ball, literally 0 times. They could not get the ball into the end zone. They had a bunch of red zone issues. They solved all those red zone issues in week 3. Granted, they had one long play that was not in the red zone, but they solved all that in week 3. And part of the success that they had was not passing the ball a ton in the red zone. So you look at the Commanders, they've run the ball at the 4th highest rate in the red zone and the 3rd highest rate inside the 10-yard line. And they've run a ton of plays in the red zone and inside the 10 against their opponents. So they actually have the 2nd most rush attempts inside the 20 and the most rush attempts inside the 10. But before you hear that and you immediately think, why isn't it Brian Robinson? Keep in mind, QB scrambles count as rush attempts. So all the times that Jaden Daniels is running the ball, that goes into this number. And that's why these numbers are so high. So if you want to look at how it's divvied up between Brian Robinson Jr. and between Jaden Daniels, Brian Robinson, he's got 9 carries inside the 20 compared to 7 inside the 20 from Daniels. If you look inside the 5, the real money downs, they each have 4 carries inside the 5-yard line. Daniels has 3 rushing touchdowns. Brian Robinson only has 1. When Daniels scrambles, he's a very effective scrambler, and they've been using his legs pretty well. His legs have been, like I said, they've been really good. He has 15 runs that have resulted in first downs. That's first among quarterbacks, ahead of Jalen Hurts and the tush push, ahead of Lamar Jackson. And that's actually 5th among running backs when you include, or 5th when you include running backs, right? Tied with David Montgomery. 3rd most, not 5th. 3rd most when you also look at running backs. So he's been very good. And this is a matchup where I expect the Commanders to be able to move the ball up and down the field against the Cardinals. The Cardinals have the 23rd ranked defense according to DVOA, but the 29th ranked passing defense specifically. The run defense has been decent, 11th ranked run defense. Now they're missing an important piece among their defensive line. So if the Commanders end up having success running the ball with Brian Robinson, I would not be surprised, but I do think that the Commanders are going to be passing the ball more. I think that's going to lead to more scramble opportunities for Daniels, and we've seen him run in the red zone. Again, 3 touchdowns in 3 games. And in week 1, Josh Allen rushed for 2 touchdowns against the Cardinals, and he's the only rushing quarterback that the Cardinals have seen. Week 2 was Stafford, week 3 was Goff. 2 guys that aren't running. Week 1, it was Josh Allen. He rushed for 2. Would not be surprised if we saw something similar. Daniels rushed for 2. We just need him to get 1, and we're cashing out this bad boy. That's play number 3. Play number 4, we're sticking in the same game. It's our first player in the 100 club. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. So we're taking him 75 plus receiving yards, plus 130 odds at Bet365. And we're laddering him up to 100 plus receiving yards, plus 320 odds at DraftKings. And we're putting a half unit on that bad boy. So on the other side of the field, Marvin Harrison Jr. should absolutely blow up in this game. You know, we've targeted this Commanders defense each of the last 2 weeks. Now we're making it 3 in a row with Marvin Harrison Jr. In week 2, Malik Neighbors went off against the Commanders. 10 receptions, 127 yards, and a touchdown. Week 3, it was Jamar Chase's turn to blow up against the Commanders. 6 receptions, 118 yards, and 2 touchdowns against the Commanders. The beauty of the Commanders, their offense is awesome. Their defense is not awesome. That means every game turns into a blowout, so you're going to want pieces in Commanders games, especially in a game in which the defense that the Commanders are playing stings, which we've already detailed in the Cardinals. According to DVOA, the Commanders have the worst defense in the NFL, with the worst passing defense in the NFL as well. The Commanders are also the 3rd worst defense, specifically against number 1 wide receivers, again, according to DVOA. I have no idea how they're only the 3rd worst and not the worst. I'm just looking at DVOA. According to Matt's DVOA, the MVOA, but that's not a real thing, but they're the worst because we've seen Malik Neighbors and Jamar Chase go off against them. Now, looking at Marv specifically, it's been a hit or miss start. Week 1, he did nothing. The panic alarms were up. We were wondering, is he going to be a bust? It was terrible. Week 2, He was great. 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, and only 4 receptions in a game in which he barely needed to do anything in the second half. Week 3, he only had 64 yards in what was actually a pretty good matchup against the Lions. Now, there does seem to be a little bit of timing that needs to be worked out between Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. We saw both in week 2 and week 3. They are very close multiple times on connecting for either big plays or touchdowns or both. They just did not quite have the timing down. That's something that they're going to work on. They're going to figure it out. 2 incredibly talented players. And luckily, if there's ever an opportunity to try some things out and to work on your timing and to get it right, it would be against these Commanders. And the last point I'll make here is it looks as though Trey McBride is going to be out for this game. Either by the time you're watching this, he's confirmed out, but it would be shocking if he played. That's only going to help Marvin Harrison Jr. McBride currently leads the Cardinals in target share, which again opens things up for Marvin Harrison Jr. He's got a great matchup. He should be able to explode against the Commanders. That's play number 4 and our first player in the 100 club. And then our last play, our 5th and final player that we're backing for Sunday. Our second player in the 100 club is Nico Collins. Taking him 80 plus receiving yards, plus 100 odds at flip for a full unit. Taking him 100 plus receiving yards, plus 225 odds at bet 365 for a half unit. Another receiver that is due for an absolute explosion game in this matchup. Another incredibly juicy matchup. This time, Nico Collins is going up against the Jaguars, whose pass defense has been horrific. And before we even get into the Jaguars, Nico Collins has been awesome. He leads the NFL in receiving yards. He's got 338, leads the NFL. He's averaging 112.7 receiving yards per game. Now, eventually, he's going to have a game. Receivers are not always this consistent. It's going to be in a tougher matchup. It is not going to be in this matchup, in my opinion. According to Fantasy Points, quarterback for the Texans, CJ Stroud, has the second best coverage matchup grade of all week 4 quarterbacks. Basically, what that means is Fantasy Points looks at the types of coverage that the quarterback is good against and what types of coverage that the defense plays. And again, this is the second best matchup of all week 4 quarterbacks. The reason why this is such a good matchup for CJ Stroud is because the Jags play a ton of man coverage. The entire NFL is turning into a zone defense, except for the Jaguars. They are zagging. They play man defense 61.4% of the time. That leads the NFL by a mile. The next closest team in terms of man coverage is the Broncos, who played 47.9%, less than 50%. And then you look at the other side of that. Okay, they're not playing zone, they're playing man. That means they're not playing zone. And they play zone defense at the lowest rate in the league, which is not a surprise. Also by a mile. They run zone 36.8% of the time. Next closest team is at 51.1. Good for the Jaguars for trying to do something different. Play man where everybody else is playing zone. The unfortunate reality is they're not very good at it. Now we're going to get into how bad their defense is. But Nico Collins has very good numbers against man defense. He's got the 7th highest yards per route run in the entire NFL against man coverage and the 6th highest targets per route run as well. So he's getting a lot of targets and he's getting a lot of yards against man coverage. That's why the coverage grade is so good for CJ Stroud, because of Nico Collins, right? They've performed well against man. And looking at this Jags defense, 3rd worst passing defense according to DVOA. They've allowed the 4th most passing yards per game and the 4th highest yards per route run as well. Part of the issue with the Jaguars is they really haven't been able to tackle. They are allowing a ton of yak and a ton of missed tackles. They've allowed the 2nd highest yards after the catch per reception, so the 2nd highest yak per reception, and the 7th highest yards after contact per reception. So basically, like when a player catches the ball and gets contacted, they're allowing the 7th highest yards after first contact. They've missed a total of 15 tackles, which is the third highest in the NFL. All that stuff bodes very poorly when you're playing Nico Collins. Nico Collins is 2nd in the NFL in yards after catch, but he's 1st in yards after contact per reception. He's an absolute monster. It's hard to bring down. It's tough to see the Jaguars slowing him down, especially with Tank Dell out for this game, so it's just more targets for Nico Collins. We know that CJ Stroud performs incredibly well against bad defenses. We know he loves Nico Collins. I see an explosion game for him, as I mentioned, rounding out our 5th and final player for the evening, and that's all we got. So a ton of plays for you guys to lock in, 5 official bets, along with 3 players that we are laddering. A lot of units risked with a lot of potential profit. Let's hope we have an incredible day. The last thing I'll mention here is that before we get out of here is that I do have a dub club where I send all these plays out for $5 a month. So if you're interested and you want all my plays sent to you, again, only $5 a month, get sent directly to your phone via text, email, or Telegram. Check out the dub club. It's mostly for the people that want to get the plays in before the odds change, because, you know, by the time you watch the video, these odds might be different. The dub club members get them as soon as I decide what to play it. So they're able to get all of the current odds. And sometimes not everybody has time to watch the YouTube videos. We all got lives. I understand. That's why I came out with the dub club, to give people the option to get plays early and to not have to watch the YouTube videos. But if you're not interested, no problem. You can still get everything for free on YouTube and on Twitter. And that is all we got. I appreciate everybody for watching. I really do. Someone in the comments says that when I say I appreciate it, I mean it. I do. I really appreciate it. The whole point of me doing this is for people like you to watch it. So I appreciate it. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and have a good one.